Hey guys, welcome to the AFL Round 9 betting trend report. In this video, I'm going to go through all 9 games coming up this weekend, the matchups, what the odds were last time those sides met, what the total was, and whether their recent matches, who's been covering, have the games and going over or under the total, and also go through my early betting thoughts for every single one of these games. But before we look at them, I just want to quickly recap last weekend, what happened from a betting perspective. So of the 9 games, 7 of them went under the total points line. So if we look at the total points betting for the season, that's now made the under record slightly better. 37 of the 72 games have gone under now. Games with an home underdog have been going over slightly more. Games with a home favorite have been going under. Also, if we look through day matches, have been going over. Night matches still been going under the total points line. There are only 2 games, as I said, last weekend that went over the total. They were Sydney versus GWS. That was a game where the total line was a lot lower than it really should have been due to the weather predicted. It only really hit during the second half. And then the other game that went over was the Hawthorn Western Bulldogs game. Both fairly big over teams so far this season. There are quite a number of teams that are either one extreme or another, as you'll see here when you look through the overall record, like Adelaide and Brisbane, who meet this weekend, both 2-6 to the under, and a few sides 6-2 to the over as well. This is why you want to keep track of this throughout the season. So if you want to view these sheets every single week, either watch the videos or check out the bet finds where you get access to the total points, ATS, all the sheets, and also the bet finders as well for every game. Also, last weekend of the 9 games, the home sides covered 6 of the 9 games. The only away teams that covered their games were Collingwood against Carlton. Even though the game was at the MCG, Collingwood's still down as the away side. Then all the way to Sunday, Fremantle covering against Richmond, winning that game by 54 points. And Hawthorn winning outright and covering as the biggest underdog of the round, 98-91. The underdogs who won outright, mentioned a couple of them. Hawthorn against the Western Bulldogs, then also Melbourne beating Geelong, Collingwood beating Carlton, and then the first game of the round, Adelaide winning the showdown against Port Adelaide. If we look at the ATS records overall on the season, so far it's very, very tight. Home and away sides have split it exactly 50% either way. Home favorites still have a slightly positive record. Favorites overall 38-34. Big favorites do have the best overall record though, covering 10 of 13 games. That's when favorites are -30.5 or greater. Now, so that's enough about last week. Looking ahead, because we got a few really, really good games coming up this weekend and quite a lot of games where the odds are fairly close. So we're going to run through those. So firstly, Thursday night, Carlton against Melbourne. Melbourne small favorites, -2.5. Carlton have won the last 2 meetings, the latest in the finals by 2 points. And then also late last season, winning by 4 points. So both by really close margins. Prior to that, Melbourne won the previous 8 games. So have Carlton kind of turned the tables on them? It's hard to tell. Obviously, the 2 wins were by very, very small margins under a kick. Melbourne come up 2.5-point favorites. Last time they met, they were -5.5. Prior to that, -10.5. So the line keeps closing with Carlton winning those recent matches. Melbourne, I would say, are the side in better form overall. Really impressive last week, beating Geelong. They're still the #1 defensive side in the league, and that's where the real difference is between these 2 sides. Melbourne being the #1 defense in points conceded, and Carlton ranked 14th in that same category. In attack, though, Carlton slightly better, the #3 attacking side compared to Melbourne, ranked 8th. This is a game where it genuinely could go either way, and I'm leaning towards playing either team 1-24 kind of margin for this game. I think it's going to be close and only around 10 points either way. Probably defensive-wise, lean towards Melbourne. Any games that are genuinely close contests like this, I always tend to lean towards the better defensive side. However, like the odds are already slightly in favor of Melbourne, so there's not a ton of value there. The other main betting trend for this game is the past 6 head-to-head have gone under. The total at 174.5 is pretty high, suggesting a higher scoring game than we've seen for these two sides previously. You'll notice the previous totals for their games have all been around the 160 mark or even slightly lower, with the latest being 153.5. However, that was during the finals. So you definitely got to keep that in mind. From a total perspective, would slightly be leaning towards the under. Carlton have been scoring really well, but do face the best defensive side. So leaning towards the under at such a high number, and also either side 1 to 24. I don't think there's a ton of value in the under though. The numbers I have exactly 174.5 as well. Geelong versus Port Adelaide. Geelong, fairly big favorites here, minus 23.5, largely on the back of Port Adelaide's horrible performance last week. Connor Rosie being out injured as well. So obviously Geelong should be winning this game, especially at home. Both sides coming off losses, but the Cats look better suited to be winning this game. I'd be surprised if they completely blow out Port Adelaide. I think Port are good enough to keep it somewhat close. Not really convinced in taking like minus 23.5 for Geelong here. Looking a little bit deeper into this game, I'm interested in the Geelong first half line, just due to looking into their stats a little bit deeper. Geelong are one of the best first half sides. Port are only mid-pack in the first half and have been performing a lot better in second halves. So that is my potential angle for this game, especially with those key outs for Port Adelaide. Some betting trends for this game. Geelong have won 3 of the past 4. Home team has covered 6 of the past 9 and won 7 of the past 9. So that sets up well for the Cats. The past 3 matchups have gone over the total points line, set at 174.5, which is higher than their past 5 meetings the total has been set at. Interestingly enough, like kind of taking a little bit of a risk here, playing the over in this game. I feel like it's set a touch high. Port Adelaide are the #1 team in shots a goal. However, they have the worst accuracy in the league. So Port are able to kick straight. They can definitely be scoring a lot higher. They're averaging just under 90 points a game. Geelong averaging the mid-90s, 94.9 points a game so far this season. So there is a chance this game does go over fairly comfortably, but it does depend on Port Adelaide kicking straight, which is always a risk in those situations. But definitely interested in the first half in that game. Fremantle versus Sydney. This is the other game on Friday night. So 2 pretty good games on Friday night. We've been getting a lot of really good games lately in the AFL. Sydney are only small favorites here, minus 6.5, coming off their big win against GWS last week. Fremantle coming off 50-plus point win against the Tigers, who are really struggling at the moment. So there's a lot more merit to the Swans' latest performance. They have won 3 of the past 4 and covered 3 of the past 4 against Fremantle. Their last trip over there was round 19 last season, where the Swans were a 12.5 point favorite and won that game 105-76. This is a game of 2 of the best 3 defensive sides in the league. Fremantle ranked 2nd, the Swans ranked 3rd. So a real good defensive contest, hence why the line's set at 157.5, which I feel like is a little bit low. So touch interested in the over here. The Swans are also the #1 attacking side. So interested in the over 157.5. Also interested in most likely the Swans to win by 139 points. I think Sydney get the job done here. But don't think it's a complete blowout or anything like that. Fremantle defensively are good enough to keep this game close, especially over in Perth. Considered like the minus 6.5, but leaning towards the 139 as it's slightly at better odds. And I still like either way, I feel like will hit if Sydney win this game. Next game, Hawthorn versus St Kilda. Hawthorn got the win on the board last week against the Western Bulldogs. This is a really, really interesting game. St Kilda are a side who haven't really been at their best so far this season. They're deserving favorites. The line's minus 9.5, and they do have a good record against the Hawks, winning 6 of the past 7 and covering 4 of the past 5. St Kilda won the most recent matchup at Marvel in round 20 last season, 122-93. They're only 4.5 point favorites there. This game being played down in Tasmania. That definitely gives the edge to Hawthorn. I think St Kilda are good enough to win here, but I couldn't really back them with confidence. So from a side perspective, this is a game probably going to stay out of. I don't think it's going to be a big margin either way, though. 5 of the past 6 head-to-head have gone over with the total at 159.5. If conditions are okay, I'd have a slight lean towards the over there. But not much confidence at all on that game. Essendon versus GWS, and just going back to that's one of the biggest advantages you have as a bettor is that you can choose when to bet and when not to bet. You don't need to force a bet into a game where you don't think there's any value in what the current odds are. Next game, Essendon versus GWS. The Giants are only small favorites here, -7.5. Last time they met was round 23 at Giants Stadium last season, and GWS won that game by 126 points, 162 to 36. GWS were 19.5-point favorites there. Last time they met in Melbourne was round 4 last season. Essendon were 11.5-point favorites. Essendon coming back from their trip to Perth last week. This is a real good spot for GWS to bounce back from their performance last week. I think they win and win well, so I'm definitely interested in the -7.5 for this game. Essendon were far from convincing against the Eagles last week, who have shown us recently they're playing well at home. However, Essendon, that was a game where Essendon really could have made a statement, but they didn't do that. GWS, important game for them to bounce back. They rank higher than Essendon in almost every key metric, and so I'm surprised this line is very low. They have won 5 of the past 6 versus the Bombers and covered 3 of the past 4. The concern is obviously they didn't win and cover the game in Melbourne last season. However, GWS are performing really, really well this season. If you remember back to last year, they really hit their stride in the second half of the season and have carried that into this year. So going back to round 4 doesn't really give the best indication on how they're going. Then Richmond versus the Western Bulldogs. The Western Bulldogs, 19.5-point favorites. They've won the past 2 against Richmond, the latest in round 21 last season by 55 points. They were 15.5-point favorites for that game. The line's now up to -19.5. Richmond are really, really struggling this season. They're the worst attacking side in the league. They just can't manage points. So Western Bulldogs should win this game and win it pretty well. Prior to last season, Richmond did have a really good record against the Bulldogs, but that's kind of turned around and Richmond have fallen off dramatically. I don't think there's a big enough increase in the line here from their last meeting. And I'd be interested in the Bulldogs -19.5. There is definitely concerns around them though. Obviously losing to Hawthorn last week and then dropping the game against Fremantle in the last quarter the week prior. But this is a very, very winnable game and they should get the job done. Not completely sure exactly how I want to play it, but I think the Bulldogs win and win comfortably. Gold Coast versus North Melbourne. Gold Coast big favorites here, -43.5. Even though in round 24 last season, North Melbourne beat them by 35 points, 132 to 97. Gold Coast were 20.5-point favorites there last time. On the Gold Coast, they were 27.5-point favorites against North Melbourne and won that game comfortably by 43 points. Gold Coast have won and covered 5 of the past 7. At home, they should get the job done. Gold Coast is the side in the league that have the biggest disparity between their home and away scoring. And they've just shown they perform a lot better at home than they do anywhere else. They're blown out by the Lions last week. North Melbourne still yet to put a win on the board. I really don't like a 40+ line here for a side like Gold Coast. But against North Melbourne, wouldn't surprise me if they were to cover it, but I think it's too big. So I'm just staying out of that. The angle I looked at for this game is the Gold Coast team total to go over. Sides against North Melbourne this season, pretty much every single week, their team total has been going over. It's currently at 105.5. So there's mid 105 range for Gold Coast. Feel like that number is just definitely a touch high. So just going to see if the number comes down a little bit, what it does later in the week. But otherwise, potentially maybe a player prop game for me. Collingwood at home against Eagles, -41.5. Feel like this is a better, -40 bet for Collingwood against West Coast than Gold Coast against North Melbourne. The Eagles are a side that haven't traveled well at all this season. Collingwood generally always find a way to win games, but it is definitely a big line. So probably personally at this stage won't be backing it, but I think Collingwood win and win well. Interestingly enough, the past 6 meetings, they're 3 apiece, these two sides. So it's not like Collingwood's really made a mess of them. And also, you don't actually have to go back all that. Round 20 in 2021, West Coast were 5.5-point favorites against Collingwood. So only a few years ago, and the Eagles were a favorite. Collingwood won that game by 45 points, though. If you go back to their meetings in WA in that season, West Coast were 20.5-point favorites, so $1.33. That seems a long time ago now. Also, these two sides, 4 of the past 6 have gone over the total points line. West Coast only averaging 72 points a game this season, which is 15th in the league. Both sides ranked bottom 6 defensively in points conceded. So that tends to lend itself to a high scoring game. But with the total at 171.5, I feel like this definitely is about 5 points too high. And then final game of the round, Adelaide versus Brisbane, as I spoke about earlier in the video. These sides are 2 and 6 to the under this season, and also were the top 2 attacking sides from last season. However, neither of them have been able to get it going at all in attack this season. Obviously, a couple of games here and there, they put up a score, but not consistently. Their individual meetings, though, 5 of the past 6 head-to-head have gone over, and the total at 168.5, due to how they've been performing in attack this season and how both sides, especially Brisbane, but both of them are top 6 defensive sides this season. So that's definitely brought the number down. I would have liked to see it come down a little bit more. The numbers just this season alone aren't equivalent of a total of 168.5. So I feel like this number has been pushed up a little bit due to the recent history of their games being high scoring. And for that reason, I don't really want to take it. Feel like the way I kind of want to go for this game is the Lions at the plus 6.5, but also interested in either side, 1 to 24, looking at a try bet in this game. I feel like it's a game that could lend itself to a close matchup, especially with both sides being so defensive minded. Even the Lions last week, they picked up a few injuries and just really shut the door on Gold Coast in the second half. They weren't scoring, but they were just making sure Gold Coast weren't scoring. So those reasons, I'm staying away from the over as it currently stands. But interested in the Lions plus 6.5 or either side of 1 to 24 is how I'll likely play the final game of the round. So that's how round 9 is currently looking for me. I'll be posting videos later in the week previewing the specific games in depth, going through the bet finders for the matchup, showing like the stats and breaking down exactly how I think each game is going to be played and why I'm making certain bets on these matchups. So definitely, if you like videos where we go through the stats on AFL and other sports, definitely subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any videos coming up really soon. And if you want access to all my spreadsheets for every single sport, made them available on investor.bet.com.au. I'll put the link in the description so you can get access to all of these and also all my bets every single day. I'm not only betting on AFL and NRL, but also the American sports. Currently, we're in the playoffs for the NBA and NHL, and baseball season's also in full swing. So with the bet finders, you also get my bets every single day. I post them the night before, and so it's really easy to follow along. Overall, I created this channel to help bring some insights into the sports betting where we're actually using stats. We're not, just betting on gut instinct. I tried that when I first started betting back in 2012. And for about a year and a half, I realized that's not going to work overall for me long term. And I wanted to make good money out of doing this and do it full time. So that's why I started building databases and sheets to help me really analyze games in depth and make betting decisions based off that. So I want to pass that on to you guys so you can start making more money betting every single year.